Hi, welcome back to another episode of the Lorne Epstein Show. I'm your host, Lorne Epstein, here on 96.7 FM, Arlington, Virginia. Today we are broadcasting from Las Vegas, Nevada at the Unleash conference. And I've got a really cool guest with me today, Raj Sundarason.
Not bad. Sundarason will be good, but you're almost there.
Okay, so Sundarason?
Yeah.
Okay, Sundarason. So Raj Sundarason, he is the global head of human resource line of business for a company called WalkMe. And he has well over 12 years experience in human resource technology. He's advised organizations on their HR transformation needs. Before that, he's held various management roles in companies including SAP, NGA Human Resources, and ADP. The company he works for, WalkMe's digital adoption platform, helps companies like yours better onboard, manage, and support their employees in using technology. Welcome to the show, Raj.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So one of the things that I was, thinking about talking about is what happens when people want to get technology, right? I think we've all seen just bad deployments, right? People go out, they buy technology because IT wants it, or one person says this is the best technology. Is that like the majority of the time? Like how often do people make these bad mistakes? Because I know part of what you do is kind of helping people make the right choices.
So what we're seeing a lot of the time is most organizations spend a huge amount of time thinking about what I'm buying and why I'm buying, but not enough time thinking about how am I going to get value out of what and why. And we talk about the power of how at WalkMe all the time. And I think we're now in an era where organizations are starting to think, hey, maybe it's not so much about features and functionalities anymore, but it's around how can I get my end users in my organization to use the technology to get the outcome that I actually wanted them to get to in the first place from buying the technology.
Because often technology will get bought and people just keep doing the same thing using that technology or not.
It's just like, like Einstein's definition of insanity, right? Doing the same thing over and over again and hoping to get a different outcome. So as we started through this journey, how we started was very interesting. It was basically because of our founder, his mother's curiosity with technology, right? And she wanted to use digital technology. More importantly, she wanted to do online banking. And her idea of doing online banking was actually calling her son each time she had a problem. Where do I click? What do I do? How do I do this? And after doing this 6 or 7 times, our founder basically said, I think there'll be other mothers like this out there. And that's how WalkMe came to being. So our underlying ideology really is around how we can help end users engage with any form of digital technology to get a better outcome. Right.
So when you say any form of digital technology, what do you mean?
So we started initially to help people execute on websites, right? How to execute on transactions. As we started doing that, our customers, so we've got T-Mobile, Amazon, Microsoft were customers of ours. They started saying, hey, you've done such a wonderful job on the front-end systems that we have. Can you now help us in our back-end corporate systems? Right, so they've gone out and they bought a whole bunch of SaaS technologies. They've got a whole bunch of native mobile technologies. And ultimately, the same challenge exists. People just don't know how to use all the kit that they've got.
Tell the audience, tell me what is it you guys do?
Okay, so we have a piece of technology that can sit on top of any form of digital technology. So
any form? Any form.
So as long as you're HTML based, we sit on top of you, literally like a wrapper, right? And we then begin to enable you to go through an online experience. So the easiest way to describe this, think of a GPS. In the olden days, you used to get out a guide, open up, figure out where you're going. You used to write down where you had to turn, where the traffic light was, and everything else. And if you made a mistake, good luck, right? Today, that experience has evolved into a GPS. You punch in where you're going, you hit send, and what happens after that? You're told, turn left, turn right, do a U-turn. That is what we've done. We've brought the GPS onto any digital technology out there. So you no longer need to learn the process. You just have to follow instructions to execute on the process.
So that's really cool. I mean, that's really cool. And so I want to just talk more a bit about the problem, and then we'll talk about the solution.
Sure.
So Do you have any numbers, like how often people are not fully utilizing their software, or like how would you quantify the existing problems in most corporations?
Sure. So when we first look at the main problem, the main problem starts with how much new software is being sold, right? So at the end of the day, by the end of 2025, we believe close to $400 billion worth of new software is going to be acquired by organizations.
Worldwide.
Yes. Now, when you think about that problem, right, you have to ask yourself, why is so much software being sold, right? Because this whole notion of digital transformations has taken place.
Because they're software sales guys.
Well, there you go. But also at the same time, the reason why it's happening is because everybody is hoping that this new software is going to make people more productive, right? So time to productivity is actually going to come down. But what we've actually seen is that time to productivity, right, has actually gone up threefold. So it's taking people longer to be productive in their jobs today because of all the new technology that's being pushed into the equation. So that's the first problem. The second problem on top of that, the cost of training, right? 12 months ago, the average cost of training per employee in an organization was about $800 according to Learning Magazine. Right? Today, it's closer to the $2,000 mark.
Wow.
So not only is time to productivity going up, the cost is going up as well. But the one thing that's remained consistent is the human condition. And the human condition is such that we only have the capacity to probably retain between 20 to 25% of what we've sort of like learned. And after that, we go through this notion of a forgetting curve, which accelerates down pretty quickly.
Right.
So that's the first, what I would say, macro problem that's out there.
There's a high evaporation of knowledge.
Absolutely. Now, the second layer to that was that nobody quite understood that when they talked about digital transformations, they talked about it as a singular experience. But when you think about it, it's not, because you may have a CRM transformation, you may have a HR transformation, you may have a finance transformation. And if you think about all those waves, right, no sooner have you...
Of getting new software in.
Correct.
Transformation meaning company goes and they get some new software.
Deploys it.
Transformation.
They deploy it, they try to deploy it, they try and train people on it, you go live, and as soon as you go live, what happens? You get a new functional release, and then you start again.
Right.
So you have these waves, right, and multiple waves, and the amplitudes are pretty great. And what is the main common piece in all of that is that you've got a human being caught in all those waves, and they're getting beaten about, right? And so as a result, they just can't digest what's going on. So when we saw that, we then went one level lower, and we peeled the onion back around what we saw as the employee, and we learned one very critical thing. Every organization has this employee. The persona is known as the overwhelmed employee, right? And the overwhelmed employee has a few characteristics, but when you go and speak to that overwhelmed employee, what do they say? You know, we've got all this new technology, why aren't you using it? So number one, I just simply don't have the time. That's the first thing they'll tell you. Mm-hmm. The second thing they'll tell you is, I'd like to use it, but I can't find the application. And the third thing they will tell you is, when I'm in the application, what do I do next?
Right.
Right? So that was the third layer around the business problem. So when we understood that, we then said, okay, maybe there is a unique way that we've got to rethink about the transformation journey. So as we did that, we worked with a lot of program teams, and we learned that, you know, there is a curve. And, you know, when you buy new technology, you're buying on the premise that, you know, today you're at a certain point in the organization, you buy the new tech, it's going to elevate performance, right?
Things are going to get better.
Absolutely. So, you know, you've got this great mission, vision, everybody spent a lot of money on this, and then what happens is, as you start doing the implementation, you go through this valley of death in the implementation, valley of despair, valley of desperation. Why? Because all of a sudden you're saying, how am I going to impact this change?
Right.
And what it suddenly dawns on people now is that those change programs that they used to do was a one-size-fits-all model, right? But guess what? No organization has one type of employee. We're filled with a multi-generational workforce in cross industries, which makes
I have seen people at work get to applications through different ways.
Yes.
And use applications in different ways.
Yes.
And that the first time I saw that, I was like, what? Why aren't you using it the way I use it?
Correct.
You know, and then I realized, like, people use their phones in different ways, and who's to say which is better or which is worse, but clearly we don't use software the same way.
Yeah. And I'll give you an example of that in a moment. So through these waves, what we learned, what Gartner has done a lot of research on.
Gartner. So explain what Gartner is.
So Gartner is basically an advisory firm, right, who basically provide end users with, I would say, advisory documentation to share knowledge, experience in terms of, what to look out for when you're doing programs. So there are
they do kind of
advisory
reviews
firms
on some of these softwares.
Absolutely.
They take a look at it, they analyze it. It's kind of like a Consumer Reports of
Correct.
high-end business software.
Correct. And what Gartner said in one of their reports was 75% of digital transformations are going to fail. That's kind of profound if you think about it.
Right.
Where if you don't have a digital transformation going on in your company, your shareholders are getting very, very nervous. So you're saying this is happening everywhere, but 3/4 of every program is going to fail. Why? It's because no one's thought about rethinking how you make it work. So as we sat down with companies, we realized that these transformation programs could be broken down into 4 unique pit stops. Right? And the first one was system onboarding. Right? As simple as that. How do you onboard an end person into new software? How it's done today, it's very simple. People gather in a big room, you put something up on a PowerPoint, you hope your audience is paying attention, and guess what? 2 weeks later or 2 months later, you hope they can go back, open up the system, and actually use the software.
Right.
By which point, by the way, the software has evolved and changed, and they have no clue what's going on.
Right.
So the first thing that we want to do is change how you onboard people, and hey, wouldn't it be great if you could actually onboard them in the system itself? So what we've been able to do using our technology is to actually introduce the software to the person when they actually first get into the system.
So I can give some context for the listeners. What you're saying is that if I have a piece of software and I want to share a story first.
Sure.
So I was at a software development company, a global software development company, and they had bought a new project management time billing system because we're all consultants. And they had, I think, started in January, and now it's like May, and it had not really gotten activated. And I got approval to buy an ATS. And as soon as I got approval, the CEO was so frustrated with that other piece of software not getting implemented. He's like, turn it on now, like right now. And he literally ripped up what we were doing in front of my whole team, and I had no choice but to basically turn it on. I turned it on, and boom, people just used it. There were no problems. So the software that we're talking about is Smart Recruiters. It was so easy, and I've been using software at work for 30 years, and I've even done programming, and I've never seen anything as easy as this. It was like using my phone, an app on my phone. But still, we had this other larger piece of software that was more critical, as critical to the business, still not implemented for almost a year to get everyone using it. And so I think, luckily, I think my piece of software was in that 25%. The other piece of software was in that 75%. But this is really common. And I think a lot of folks won't buy software, or they're afraid to change because of what you're saying. It's
Absolutely.
like they all know, they've heard the stories, or they've seen it, and they don't want to be involved in that kind of thing.
No, absolutely, and that's
your piece of software. Is it an HTML wrapper?
Yes, effectively.
So a wrapper is something that lays over your web browser.
Yes.
And it's seeing what's going on.
Yes.
So how does it know how this piece of software operates, and then tell me how it works?
Well, those are the smarts inside the algorithms that we have.
Yeah.
So ultimately, it's deployed via browser extension, so you don't have to do any internal coding. And the moment that's deployed...
So everyone who uses it just goes to the site, downloads a browser extension on their Chrome or Explorer?
Yeah, 3 clicks and you're done.
Right.
And so obviously then the WalkMe experience now is overlaid on top of the...
And it has to be for that particular application?
Yes. And then if you want to add applications as you go along...
And you can add an infinite number?
Absolutely. So you start with one, and then you grow. So if you think about it, T-Mobile started with one application with us, and today they use us on 26 applications.
Wow.
And their big challenge is they've got a workforce that is transient at best, because there are a lot of retailers, a lot of kids out of college. They can't afford to keep them in training classes for 6 weeks.
Sure.
Because you need to get them onto the floor as quickly as possible, and basically WalkMe helps onboard those employees in those pieces. Now, when you talk about how we deploy, when we deploy over a browser extension, what then allows everybody to have that WalkMe experience, and because that browser extension is deployed, we now have the ability to watch what you're doing. We don't record the actual data that you have. We record HTML. What we call it, metadata. So if you key in 1, 2, 3, 4 into a cell, I don't know you've keyed in 1, 2, 3, 4, but I know you've keyed in 4 digits, for want of a better description. Mm-hmm. If you're spending too much time on a particular cell, I now all of a sudden know, hey, on average, people take 2 minutes here. Why are you taking 7? So what that allows us then to see is, if there are enough users who are having problems on a particular cell, it directs us to say, hey, maybe we might want to build some content there to help reduce the time they spend there.
But do you prompt me to do something?
Absolutely.
So how does that prompt occur?
So basically, because what most organizations have these step-by-step guides, we leverage the richness in those guides and we let a process run. Now, as that process runs, we're also at the same time learning from what people are doing. Absolutely, to an extent.
Right, but when you teach it once on, let's just say, ABC software, is that now anyone who buys that ABC software getting the learning from that original teaching, or do they have to teach it again?
So what will happen is, what we're seeing is no two companies actually have the same process. It's interesting, because if you do something like goal setting, right? Do you call it a goal? Do you call it an objective? Do you call it a KPI? Right? Do you have one level of approval? Do you have 3 levels of approval? So what we're learning as we go along is that different organizations haven't quite simplified or standardized their processes. So the system has to have a degree of flexibility to cater for that. And the analytics really then allow you the justification to go back to the company and say, hey, listen, most of our companies that we have, they probably have 10 steps in the process. You have 22, right? You're taking double the amount of time that company A, B, and C are doing. Don't you think that might be a real business case for business process redesign to halve the steps that you're doing? It's the first time in software history you now have the ability to measure how long people are taking to complete a process rather than did they log in or log out.
Right.
And that's the power of what we're doing. Now, just to touch on the analytics a little bit and talk about generations, it's very interesting that what we found through the analytics was that the older generation seemed to be engaging with the technology very early in the day. So they're typically engaging with a lot of these corporate systems between 6:30 and 8 a.m. So it's before work. But the millennials, right, they're engaging with the technology between 9:30 and 11 o'clock at night. Now, there's one piece of commonality there. In those two scenarios, there's no help desk.
Right.
So when you think about trying to execute on the process and you don't get help, you abandon the process. What WalkMe allows you to do is to have just-in-time help when you need it, not when the help desk is available.
Right.
Right? And that's the most profound thing that we've seen to really drive change and adoption on systems. Yeah,
so physically, I'm looking at my piece of software, my ATS.
Yeah.
Okay. And I won't name a company,
Sure.
just to be fair. And I load it up.
Yep.
And then I do the first thing, which is entering a job requisition.
Okay.
And I'm doing it, but then I do something wrong.
Yep.
Okay. WalkMe is watching that, and does a window pop up, or how does it coach me?
So it could do. You could configure it to do that. But what typically would happen is, if you're going to do a job requisition, right? We have a little player by the side which you open up, and you just type in "How do I?" and it says, "How do I do a job requisition?"
Okay.
Right. It immediately takes you to the start of that process.
So will it control the software?
When you say control the software,
I mean, will it actually move the software to where I've got to be, or does it
Yes.
say? Oh, so it will kind of.
It's like a GPS. Absolutely.
Right. So it's now taking the software and bringing me to the right page.
Yep.
And then it'll say, Lauren, put this data in here.
Absolutely.
Put this data in here. Then go to put this data in here. Then hit
Steps,
this key.
every step away. Think about the GPS. When you plug in, I want to go from this hotel to the airport. You don't have. It tells you turn left, turn right, traffic light, speed camera. It's
that's
the GPS.
amazing.
It's
right?
the GPS
That's
of technology.
pretty cool.
I know that the users can't see it, but I'll just give you a very
I
quick
can
view.
describe it to him. So
right?
yeah, show it to me on the. So he's taking out his cell phone.
And this is my CRM, my CRM application just down here.
iPhone.
Yeah. So it's my CRM application.
Okay, so Salesforce?
Yep.
Okay,
Just
so I'm
click
clicking
that.
on Salesforce.
Right. So what will happen is oops, what's going on here? Hopefully that will all work. Okay, so what happens is my Salesforce opens up. This is WalkMe saying, oh, by the way, I'm on your application. So let's just go to the app.
There's a little button that's saying
WalkMe by the side there.
this is working, and then the WalkMe little button, like 3/4 of the way up on the right hand side.
So
it's,
just
it's their logo.
Yeah, so just click on it.
Click on it. Okay.
And it says, okay, what would you like to do? So in this case, I want
create a new contact.
Okay, so there you go.
So now a little thing says open this menu. So it prompted me to open the menu.
Right.
Now what do I do?
Oh, so hang on a second. Let me just do that. Let's do how do I log a call? Right. So the first thing it tells you.
Okay. The Spotlight walkthrough guides the user step by step. Okay, so it's guiding me. Okay.
Yep. So
just tap saying tap that icon. Okay. Then I click on. It's opening up leads. It says it highlighted leads, and then it opened up leads. This is a multiple choice view list. Choose any lead.
You're correct.
So I can open up a lead.
And off you go.
And here I am now.
So now you add your data in. So just think about this for a moment, right? The page was pretty busy. What did we do? We zeroed in your attention by spotlighting what you needed to do. We took away the noise, and even if you wanted to press something else,
it wouldn't have worked.
Wouldn't have worked.
Right.
So now all of a sudden what we're happening here is we're helping people, right, take out the noise to execute on these processes.
Yeah, I like it.
Right? And this goes cross-application. Right. So at the end of the day, you no longer have to think about the functional silo of the application, but you think about the user. What is the journey that I want to take you on? Right? I was doing some work for a very large British bank. And one of the biggest challenges they had, because they had about 95,000 employees, was how do I get your banking details in the system as quickly as possible so I could process payroll? Right? Real big thing, because when you join a company, what you want to do is get paid, right? And typically, you'd have to go learn how to navigate multiple systems and so forth. So we just built a link, clicked on it, and what we then had the ability to do, we had the ability to automate processes. So now we can bring what we call intelligent process automation, so robotics, into the application and automate all the clicks. So you don't have to click anything anymore.
Right.
So
now it's just running it.
It's just running it. So basically it runs through all the steps and it finally stops.
It's doing the thing that a robot should do.
Absolutely.
And the part that I should do is just give it my social security number.
Done. You've got it. But as you're doing it, it does one other thing. It validates that, make sure your data is right. So if you put in too many digits or you put in the wrong character, error. So we're capturing all that up front, because when you execute it, it works like a dream.
Right.
So these are the types of things that we're thinking about.
So what's the future of this kind of software? Where do you see this?
When we started off, we thought that, we had some great functionality. And as we started building it out and engaging with the end user, we sincerely believe that we're going to have a platform that's going to have an impact on humanity, right? Because the one big thing that software had promised for a long time was we're trying to give something back to the human beings so they can get on with their day jobs. But all the data that we see is actually the software is causing more problems than good.
Yeah.
And what we see WalkMe having the ability to do is really give back time, and at the same time give you a better outcome. And if we can give an employee a better outcome, and that employee can do better at their work, and the company can get a better outcome from their employees, and salaries and bonuses and everything have an impact, well then what happens to that employee? Better school fees, better medical insurance, and overall a real impact on life. So for us, we have this critical mission around how we can have an impact on humanity using technology from a digital adoption platform.
Right. That's cool.
And
will this, I guess this impacts a lot of spaces, right? And the idea of adopting technology might be that, we have this piece of software and we don't like using it. Because we don't like using it doesn't mean it doesn't work.
Correct.
So now I can keep my bad software and I don't have to worry about it because I put on WalkMe and it's going to make my good software work maybe the way the designer intended.
So I think,
right? There's definitely
so I think that
some of that there.
So I think what happens is we spend a lot of time, software vendors spend a lot of time beating each other up for a multitude of reasons, right? Whether I've got the best UI or best UX or I've got the best hamster wheel. And I think what's important to understand that best in whose eyes, right? So ultimately, what we're about is trying to say, hey, make your decisions on what software you want to do. Our job is to make it as sticky as possible, right? To get the best out of it, right? So for us, when we go into an organization, we don't necessarily say rip and throw the old out. We basically say, hey, does it work for you? Yes. What is the problem there? Can we make it better? So we help you sweat the asset a lot more, so you get a better return out of that, so that when you're ready to make that leap to new technology, you're there.
Cool.
Yeah. So that's the real key of what we're trying to do.
So let me ask you, any parting comments and how can folks reach out to you if they want to?
So first of all, WalkMe, digital adoption platform, formulated 6 years ago. We're all across the US today. We serve over 1,500 multinationals around the world, 20% of the Fortune 500. If you need to get hold of us, it's very simple. It's walkme.com. Key in your details there. Somebody will be on the phone within half an hour. And the most important thing that we've learned in all of this is we don't necessarily have all the answers. And we learn, and we're humbled by the customers that actually engage with us, spend time with us, and we learn from them as much as hopefully they learn from us. And the more we learn, the greater the impact we believe we can have on society. So,
one last question. Do you guys use this at your own offices?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'll tell one story and then maybe we can end. We have a lot of millennials in our office. The biggest challenge with the millennials is not that they don't like the technology, they don't like the process. right? So if you want them to do something, they're like, nah, no way. So when we wanted to do our performance reviews, nobody enjoys doing it, never mind a millennial.
Right.
So we basically pushed out our technology, which appeared on when you logged into your system, and it basically said, click now to do your performance reviews. And people tried to ignore it, but we basically dismantled the screen, so all you could do was click on that button to take you in to do your performance reviews. And guess what? Within 48 hours, 98% of performance reviews were done.
Wow.
Right. So absolutely, we use it. We use it on all our systems.
That's
because
great.
when you are a hyper-growth company and you're doubling in size, the hardest part is how do you onboard someone as quickly as possible. So we use it on all our systems. I live in Singapore. I have a team in Australia. Ophir, who's sitting with me today, is in our office in Tel Aviv. We've got 150 associates in San Francisco. How do you bring everyone together? The way to bring everyone together is through a digital adoption platform, and we believe it's WalkMe.
It's awesome. Thanks so much.
Appreciate the time. Thank you very much.